And welcome to NOAA's National Coastal Data Development Center's online ISO metadata training. Today we are going to focus on XML basics. Again, if you have a list of participants, if you have several people logged into one registered login, please email that list of participants to ncddcmetadata@noaa.gov. And also, if you have any questions that you would like to, for us to address offline, you can email ncddcmetadata@noaa.gov as well. All right, the resources that we will be using today, we'll still be using the FTP site, and we will be using the EDM wiki. The FTP site has all of your presentations, and after we record each session, we post them there, all of your examples and handouts and everything else there as well. The wiki, it is a wiki with a lot of extra information, so anytime you see this green information symbol in the bottom of a screen, if you click on that, that takes you to the location in the wiki that has lots of examples and further information about that topic. If you see a little security warning when you pop up, go ahead and click Proceed to Site, because NOAA, instead of buying third-party certificates, they make their own, so that's just a little thing that the browser catches and throws up, but it's okay to go there. And then the workbooks are found in on the FTP, or also on the ncddc.noaa.gov site at metadata-standards. Also, all of these links are in the chat window down here, so that you can just look at your chat window and copy and paste the links in there. All right, like I said, today we're going to be focusing on how ISO uses XML. XML is the extensible markup language. We talked last week about the relationships between the ISO standards, and as noted, the ISO 19139 is the technical specification on geographic information metadata. It's the XML schema implementation. If you have seen metadata before, you most likely saw the HTML view. This is the HTML view here. And this is achieved by applying a style sheet, an XSL, applied over the base XML to display how you want. XML, Extensible Markup Language, is a set of rules for encoding documents in machine-readable form. XML's use emphasizes simplicity, interoperability, and usability over the Internet. Here you have an HTML view and an XML view of the exact same record. Again, this is the base behind it, and if you apply a style sheet on top of it, this is how it displays. And it can also display in any manner of ways of however you want the style sheet to represent the XML behind the scenes. But this is what it would look like behind the scenes. Today we're going to explore how ISO uses XML. Since the ISO 19115 and the -2 do not provide any encoding, the actual implementation of the geographic information metadata could vary based on the interpretation of the metadata producers. In an attempt to facilitate the standardization of implementations, the ISO 19139 Comprehensive Metadata Implementation Spec provides a definitive rule-based encoding for implying the 19115 and the -2. The ISO 19139 technical specification also provides the extensible markup language XML schemas that are meant to enhance interoperability by providing a common specification for describing, validating, and exchanging the metadata about geographic data sets, dataset series, individual geographic features, feature attributes, types, properties, and etc. So with that, we're going to get into XML basics. We'll first start out with tags. Okay, tags are a markup construct that begins with like an opening caret and ends with the closing caret. Here you see a start tag. Here you have the opening and then the tag name, okay? And then in tags have the backslash, so a tag opens and starts. Think about symmetry with tags. If you open a tag, you must close a tag. But these are tags, and this is the tag name. An element is a logical component of a document which either begins with the start tag and ends with the matching end tag, or consists only of an empty element tag. Any characters between the start and end tags, which would be, this is the whole start tag, this is the whole end tag, so any information between here, okay, are the element's content. Now, it may contain markup including other elements, which are called child elements, or the content itself. So here we have the start tag greeting and the end tag greeting, and the content in between here, okay, says hello world. You can also have other tags in here as well, and then content within those tags. Those are child tags. And we'll see some examples here in a minute. An attribute is a markup construct consisting of a name-value pair that exists within the start tag or empty element tag. In this example below, the element step has one attribute, and that attribute is called number, and that number has a value of 3. So here, the step is connect A to B, but which step is it? It's step number 3. That's the attribute of that tag. All right, so here's another example of that, just kind of color-coded for you. We have our opening tags here, and we have our close tags here. Now, if a tag has content, this is how it would look in here. But if it's empty, this is how a closing tag can also look. If I have an opening tag here, I can close it like this. This is essentially the same thing as this. It just has no content, so that's a shorthand way of writing XML. This is the element name. The element name is step, and step has an attribute with a value of 3. This first example has content in the element, and that is connect A to B. So step number 3 is connect A to B. This one, it's empty. You have no content in that element. You may notice in the XML that the element names have a 3-letter code followed by a colon. An example, GCO character string. These codes are called namespaces. A namespace is a container providing context and rules for items. A definition of a term may change depending on what namespace is applied. Namespaces go hand in hand with which schemas that you're using when it comes to validation. So as you're actually reading the XML, you don't really need to know about it when you're trying to visualize and read this XML. But when it comes to validation, it plays a very important role. You see here, file identifier, you have the opening and the closing. File identifier has a child called character string, which opens and then closes. And character string has content, which just says insert text here. This is a namespace abbreviation table that identifies the namespaces that are you'll find in the ISO XML. This is just a list of most of the common ones that you'll see. You do not really need to know exactly what these mean. Just when you, in our validation series, we'll talk more about pairing the correct namespace declarations with your schemas. All right, so here's an example from ISO XML. Here you have an open tag and you have a close tag because there's no content. Why do we have no content? Well, date stamp has an attribute, nil reason. So why are we missing content? It's unknown. So we have an unknown date stamp. We have another element name called metadata standard name that opens and closes. It has a child called character string. and the character string has the content, geographic information metadata. So the metadata standard name is geographic information metadata. It just gets them used to seeing how ISO works. But if you look at the standard, the metadata standard name has a type of character string. And character string is where you can put in free text. So anytime that you need to fill out the metadata standard name, you have to have the character string in there to say, okay, here in the XML is where I'm allowed to have free text. So when an HTML style sheet represents this XML document, you'll actually see something that just says metadata standard name, geographic information metadata. So it pulls that content. And we'll go through some more examples so that you can see that. We're going to get a little bit more into ISO attributes. This is a list of your common attributes that you'll see. Again, there's a lot of information and examples and further detail on the wiki page here. But we're going to, the most common ISO attributes that you'll see is ID, ID Ref, ID Refs, UUID, UUID Ref, UOM, which is unit of measure, frame, calendar error name, indeterminate position, and then you have X-links. That's a type of attribute, and you can have several types of X-links, such as type, href, role, arc role, title, show, actuate. The most common X-links that we'll be dealing with are href and title. And then you also have the attribute called meal reason, which is pretty heavily used throughout. All right, the UUIDs are universally unique identifiers. And then we have IDs. Okay, an ID is not a universally unique identifier. Okay, this is an identifier for the element that is specified, must be unique within that XML document, but not within the world. Okay, but an ID is unique within this one document. The value of the identifier must always start with a letter or an underscore or a colon. An XML element can only have one attribute of type ID. So each XML element can only have one ID. The identifiers used in the ID attribute are XML names, which have significant restrictions. This attribute is often mandatory for such items as units and extents. You'll use it a lot in extents. Here's an example. You have base unit with an ID length unit meters, okay, and the identifier whose code space is meters. And this is, which unit system does this refer to? This points to a URL where this unit system is from. In this particular example, the ID attribute is mandatory. So a lot of times if you're having validation issues and it will give you a little error, missing ID, that means that this ID is a mandatory thing to distinguish it. Well, which unit, base unit is this? UUIDs, these are the universally unique identifiers, not just in the document you're working with, but throughout any document. These have special characteristics. A UUID is assigned to an object when it is created, and it's stable over the entire lifespan of that object. A UUID of a deleted object cannot be used again. UUIDs are required for long-term distributed data management and for realizing update mechanisms. These are also called persistent identifiers. UUID is a 16-byte number that consists of 32 hexadecimal values. The values are split into 5 groups separated by hyphens for a total of 36 characters, which are 32 values and 4 hyphens. A lot of times you'll see like the URLs won't have the hyphens in them because it's understood. There are several ways. A lot of times you'll have DOIs, which are digital object identifiers, and those are UUIDs that are registered. And then also, a lot of times how do you get a UUID? Well, you can generate them. There's a lot of UUID generators on the web. The odds of them being generated that aren't unique are very small. But that's some differences that you can look at. This is how you generate UUIDs and how you manage them. It's one of the key things to think about when you start creating metadata and how you're going to, how your organization is going to approach generating and managing and maintaining your UUIDs. A UUID Ref is a reference to an XML element in the XML document. The value must correspond to an attribute value of type ID in an existing XML element. The UUID Ref attribute allows an XML element to refer to another XML element within the same document that has a corresponding ID attribute. So if I already have a UUID in my document elsewhere, I can actually reference to that one. Say, just go use this. All right, here's an example where I have, in my document, I've already listed my contact, and it has a UUID assigned with it. And I have all the information about my organization, the name, the phone number, email, all of that information. So if I want to reuse this piece again inside of this one document, I can just say, hey, go reference this UUID. That was already listed and defined completely previously in this XML document. Now, X-links, you don't have to use that just within one document. You can link to things external. The XML linking language, X-links, allows elements to be inserted into XML documents in order to create and describe links between resources, similar to HTML hyperlinks. Linking elements are recognized based on the use of a designated attribute named XML:link and a set of accompanying global attributes. The global attributes are type, href, role, arc role, title, show, and actuate. Again, the ones that we'll most likely be using throughout the ISO are href and title. If an X-link is used, the following ISO component then is not used, because what you're doing is linking out to an external document. All right, the value of href, okay, attribute in linking elements contains a locator that identifies a resource by a URI reference or by an X-point specification. The X-link href attribute is used to reference a component, and the X-link title attribute is really used to apply a human understandable name to that component. Again, components are snippets of XML describing a specific piece of metadata content, such as information about people, websites, documents, archives, instruments, etc. A component is the finest level of granularity in a metadata record. Components are stored once and are used as often as it's required within a metadata collection. Components provide significant storage and editing advantages over the traditional metadata management method of storing each record as a whole. X-links can be used to reference a component from an unresolved metadata record, and unresolved meaning that a metadata record can contain X-links. Resolved means that, so an X-link references a specific component by its unique identifier. During the resolve process, a component referenced via X-link is retrieved and embedded in that record, and that is called the resolved metadata record. So here's a little example of that. In unresolved, in the XML document, the metadata document, you will see contact. Okay, I'm using the href that says, and it has a UUID associated with it, and says go to this link, and that will provide you with the contact information. But for human readability, I have added title, using X-link title, so I know that the contact here is NOAA, OAR, OER, Ocean Exploration and Research. And if I want further information, I can click on this href. Now, a resolved record, meaning I've gone out, taking the information contained at this link and embedded it in the document. So now the document would actually say, contact the title, it gives me that title, and my CI responsible party. So it takes all of the information here and embeds it here. You see that UUID associated with it, and it gives me the full information of my organization name, my contact info, my phone, and everything. Here's some examples here showing this in an actual metadata record. This is an HTML view, so that this is kind of stepping in here. This is an unresolved record, meaning this still contains X links. So my metadata author is here. That's more information, but it's NOAA OER, Ocean Exploration and Research. So that's my metadata author, and then it ends. And it goes on to my next element. If I wanted more information, I could just take this link and look here, and I see that here's all of this information. This is that same organization. Here's their phone number, their physical address, the hours of operation, emails. They are the point of contact. Now, a resolved record, here's the same record, just resolved. And here I expand the whole metadata author, where it's still OER, it still has that UID, and then it goes and takes all of the information from here and embeds it in the document itself. How that looks in the XML, as you see here, I have the contact, and you see all that information embedded here. But in this XML, it's just simply contact. Here's that X link. Here's that X link title. Again, this is the same record. I just showed you the HTML view and the XML views of that record, and I showed you resolved records and then the unresolved records. It's the same information, same way to do it. An advantage of this is providing X links is actually a way to have a dynamic record. That way, if I have information such as I have a contact phone number changes, all I have to do is go one location and change the phone number, that component. And what I can do is everywhere that has this link, that now points to that dynamic information. So it points back to that component, so that phone number has already been updated. The ones that I've resolved, where I've actually taken a snapshot of that component in time and inserted in, I would have to re-resolve to get the new phone number in if I wanted to. So when you're thinking about using X-links and then resolved versus unresolved records, these are things that you want to think about using in how you're going to manage with your organization. There's a lot of different mechanisms that you can use. You can create your own, component registry, or, if you want. But there's also there's one that I really like that I use that has a lot of these in, and it's actually called DocuComp. NOAA's National Geophysical Data Center has this service out there. You can search on existing components or link out to other ones. All right, you can actually run your record through a resolution process and actually use their resolver to resolve those references that you use, and to look up those references, if you will. You can also create your own, if you have an account with this, you can create your own components. Say you're going to be having a contact that you're going to use over and over again. You only have to create that contact section once and then link to it every time that you want to reuse it. So that's something that's really nice about ISO metadata, is that you can reuse those bits and pieces, again, those components, those snippets of XML. Now, the nil reason attribute is used to explain why an element is not included in the XML. This attribute allows a reason explaining why the actual value cannot be provided to exist in place of an actual value. it can have the values inapplicable, missing, template, unknown, and withheld. Okay? If you look in the standard, date has a type of date time. So it must follow the ISO date time XML format of year, 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 month, month, day, day. It does not allow free text or a string. It's only a date type. So you'd never be able to put unknown in the content of this element here, unless you leave this element blank and use the nil reason, and that's when you can put, why do I not have a date? Because my date is unknown. Code lists are used to refer to specific code list value in a register. Okay, in order to standardize allowable textual values for metadata elements, ISO metadata makes use of these code lists. A code list is an open enumeration of values. It is a flexible mechanism permitting to extend code lists as needed. Code lists contain the attributes code list value, and code space. Code list and code list value are mandatory. Okay, code list contains a URL that references a code list definition within a registry or a code list catalog. The code list value attribute is also mandatory and contains the name of the selected value. And the code space attribute is just is optional, and it just refers to an alternate expression of the code list value. So here's an example of a code list. Here you have the keyword type code list with ISO, and these are the keyword types here. You have discipline, place, stratum, temporal, and theme. These are just the code spaces here. And then these are the definitions. A lot of times the definitions will have definitions and examples of what the term is. So in the XML here, you will see keyword type. Okay, what keyword type do we have? We have theme. Okay, and it is according to this. You see right here, this code list right here. The theme is a keyword that identifies a particular subject or topic. So the best practice for using code lists is that you put the code list value here, because these two items are mandatory. The code list, which is the URL to your code list and its definition, and the code list value, which is the selection of which item from this code list am I selecting. The best practice is to also put whatever values in the code list value in the content. Remember, the content is the information between the opening and closing tags. So this keyword opens a tag, and then the keyword type closes the tag, and the content is theme. So this is the best practice to put the value here as well. This is because some HTML style sheets might not pick up this code list value because it's an attribute and it may not know to look for it. Most style sheets that are out there do show that, but a lot of times a lot of people make customized ones. And it's just the best practice, and it makes for human readability to just look, okay, what kind of keyword type am I looking at? Theme. This week, you guys will have homework. I will post these in the chat window as well. But what you're going to do is that there is a document, okay, and basically what it does, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a metadata record, and you're going to learn how to read and get information from that metadata record. So this document here asks you questions about that data that you're looking at the metadata for. The record that is located here is actually the record that you will be using to look at. I put those links in the chat window. and I will pull this up here. You have an exercise, and again, it's reading a metadata file. And what this does is asks you questions about that metadata record. And the metadata record that you'll be using, again, is in the sample metadata. Okay, here's the actual question. It just asks you basic questions about the data. What's the title of the data set? What are the bounding coordinates? That type of information. And you can look in these records. You can either choose to look at the unresolved or the resolved. I would really like for you to use the XML versions to answer these questions, but until you get comfortable finding out how this really works, you can go ahead and use the HTML view. And again, that's the difference between just getting comfortable with it. So you'll have the HTML view, which gives you a nice kind of human-readable view. And then you can also look at the HTML and XML side by side so that you can see. A little hint when looking at XML. When you're trying to identify what information is there, go ahead and start closing some of these tags, some of these arrows, so that you can kind of collapse and see, okay, what information do I have here? And right away, you know that you have, this is the information about the metadata itself, and then these are the main sections, identification information, the content information, and metadata maintenance. Okay? And then you can open up these tags and explore the information as needed. Again, you can kind of close them down, at least until you get used to navigating around and looking and viewing at the metadata itself. I can look here in the data identification. I have a citation, an abstract, a purpose, a credit, the status, point of contact, resource maintenance. I have several different sets of keywords, resource constraints, aggregation, language, topic, and then the extent. The extent covers things such as the geographic extent and the temporal extent. Okay? So that's my recommendation, is to kind of open and close these tags as you get comfortable looking at the XML. If you're not quite comfortable looking at the XML yet, you can look at this HTML view that goes through and shows you this is the information about the metadata itself, and then here we start into the identification information about the data. All right, we have a little bit of time for some questions. I see a couple of hands raised, and I see a couple of questions in the question window. So we'll go ahead and start with a couple of these questions. Question? I think we're having some audio problems, so if you could try dialing in on the line instead of using, or type the question in the chat, in the question chat. Anna, you have a question? All right, Anna, we're having some audio difficulty with you too. So type in the question, please. All right, some of the questions. DocuComp. No, DocuComp is not only available to NOAA personnel. It's available to anybody. Let me pop that up. This is DocuComp. I think it's a wonderful tool for looking up different types of components, so you can put in snippets of XML. Again, this is the URL for that, and it's a really nice tool, and it provides a lot of other services as well, such as resolving records, validating records, and providing nice rubrics, and also running different transforms on it that we'll talk about later. All right, what does nil reason mean and how is it applied? Again, nil reason is one of those attributes, and it is to show why that there's no content. What application do I use to look at an XML file? I actually use the ones that I was just showing you now. I actually I open those directly in the browser. Browsers render the XML decently for you, especially for these purposes, just to show. I've used Chrome, Firefox, Explorer, several different ones. I also have used XML Spy and Oxygen, but those are for editing XML and getting in there and doing a lot of different things with it. And we'll get to that point later, but for simply viewing the XML, I would start with a browser. Who would use resolved metadata versus unresolved metadata? Unresolved metadata that still has the X links and that you're dynamically changing, I would actually, that's something that you use while you're maintaining or keep updating a record, something that you know is going to change. So it's really great for maintaining. Now, when you want to archive that information or preserve it and store it and you consider it complete and done, that's when you'd want to have a resolved metadata record and take a snapshot in time of that information and then archive that. Is there software that auto-generates ISO metadata? Yes, there are some. And we'll get more into that in the tools. But if you have certain file types, like if you have NetCDS, if you have a tool called NCISO, which is available through NOAA's NGDC, they have a tool that will auto-generate a lot of that metadata for you based on the information of that NetCDS. I know that Art Catalog and Cat ND Edit are two other tools that will take shape files, layers, and some other types of file formats, and will the information that they can glean from that data itself, they'll apply and start the metadata records for you. Is there a way to utilize UUIDs and href through multiple XML files and not just within a single document? Yes. If you use the XLink href and you have a link pointing to that component, like I showed you in the unresolved and resolved examples here, I can reuse this in any document anywhere. In this own document and external. So if you want to use it, if you just want to use it in one document, you use the UUID Ref. But if you want to use multiple documents, I would actually put it in the use the XLink href here. I got a question, will you cover schematrons in more detail later? Yes, I will cover that in the validation section. Carol, did you have a question? All right, I guess we're having some audio difficulties, so if you would please type that. Ravina Westfall? Did you have a question? All right, again, if we're having audio difficulty, please type it. I get, what is a schematron? A schematron is something used for additional validation that we will cover in the February 26th session on validation. I also got a question about validating XML. Are there profiles for ISO? Yes, there are lots of profiles. One is called the North American Profile, or NAP. Another one is called Inspire, which is the European version of that, and I know a lot of countries use the Inspire version. There's also, Australia has their own version, their own profile, based on, it's an ISO standard, but they have a profile of that they like. I believe it's called ANZLIC. I'm not quite sure on the name of that. Let's see. Do all the different profiles use XML? Yes, XML is how the standard gets structured and implemented. Now, how those profiles get viewed through style sheets is up to the implementers. Again, they can have, instead of looking at the XML, you can have various different displays, such as this, or other displays. There's a display called the rubric display that has essentially scores your metadata, and it takes the XML and shows it in a different manner. So the XML is actually what drives whatever display that you want to show that in. Can I point to a web application to create DOI or UUIDs? There's a lot of different places for UUIDs and DOIs. Honestly, when I Google UUID generator, and here's one where I can get 1 or 100 UUIDs at once. Here I just typed in 10, and every time I refresh, it'll give me a new list. These are all unique. The odds of these ever being not unique are so slim I don't worry about it. DOIs, again, are these UUIDs that are registered, and there's a lot of different organizations. Some are for purchase. I believe there's a group out in California that's running a pretty popular DOI service at the moment. So these are all various different places. You can Google and create and generate UUIDs if you need. Should the exercises be sent? No, these are for yourself to get familiar with it, and also after you start looking at it, if it generates more questions or you don't understand something, that's when you can email us and ask us. This is really for you to be able to understand and get used to looking at ISO and looking at XML. We will go over the answer key in our next session, so this is really for you to kind of self-gauge how much understanding that you're having. How can you differentiate between an unsolved metadata with the resolved type? Again, if it contains X links like this, that means that it's unresolved. If it actually has all of this information embedded into it and you don't see the href X link, then this is a resolved record. How can you assure metadata, spatial data consistency, integrity? Well, that's what components are so nice about components. You can ensure the consistent use of components. You have, within your organization, you can say, you're going to use these components for these fields. And that way, people just point to them. You can kind of make it as part of a template. As far as integrity, again, that's a lot of that's based on the person filling in. It's subject to human error. I'm looking. Does anybody have any more questions? Lynn? Lynn, did you have a question?
I did. I was wondering if the questions and answers would be available for going back and looking at after the session is over, like in a document perhaps?
We can try to capture those and email those out if people are interested in them, yes.
That would be very useful. Thanks.
All right. All right, do we have any other questions? All right, if we have no further questions, again, these are the URLs for the exercises. If you have any, oh, we have one more question, Lynn. Did you have a question?
Hello?
Did you have
Yes, I'm sorry. I had a follow-on to that, and that was are these sessions, are they recorded? Would they be available to listen to again? Because I know out of necessity we kind of go through them a little bit fast, and to go back and review them would be useful also.
Yes, these sessions are all being recorded and posted on the FTP site. And if you look at the FTP site in the training, you will actually see a folder called Recorded Sessions. And as we record these and process them, we'll post them here. The last 2 weeks are found here. So those will be there for your leisure to go look at later.
Great, thank you.
All right, again, these are the exercises. This is the questionnaire that I'm asking you to fill out. And this is the file to use, either the XML or the HTML if you're having a little difficulty and want to get, you want to check that out. You can look at the unresolved versus the resolved records and kind of see how those work as well. So there's several different versions of that so that you can really get comfortable with looking at the metadata with using the ISO. And again, we'll go over an answer sheet at our next session. And next week, we are going to be covering UML basics, further how to read the UML and actually reading the standard and walking through that. And we'll get into you know, the UML versus the workbooks and looking at some of that as well, and really understanding the standard and what information fits where. And hopefully with this week's exercise, you'll see how a lot of that, you'll get a really sense of how ISO is really structured and organized as well. With that, I hope everybody has a good week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.